Hey, podcast listening people, welcome to another exciting episode of the B2B Mentors podcast. And I am, of course, bringing you top guests, industry experts, business celebrities, and of course, my favorite people in the whole world, real practitioners, those who are in the world of B2B marketing, business development, sales leadership, you name it, to come and chat and literally give you actionable strategies that you can take away and execute on. And our guest is going to drop some bombs today. I know it for sure. Just before I introduce my friend here, make sure you share this. If not only for you, I guarantee you there's somebody else in your network who will receive great value out of this podcast. So share it. You can find the audio on all your favorite podcast apps. And with that, I've got my friend Andy Ramirez with me, who is a Moneyball marketing specialist. I guarantee you, if you're like me and you're like nerd out about marketing, it's nothing you've ever heard about before, right? Moneyball you kind of coined that term, I think. Possibly we'll have to TM it or trademark or create some t-shirts for you and some flags. But Andy is a seasoned marketing leader who's built high functioning teams that obsess over data and use it quickly to maximize ROI. He's led marketing teams at some very impressive logos. You may have heard of a small startup company called AWS, Amazon Prime, Smartsheet, New Relic, and now at Docker as a head of marketing. And so with that, Andy, welcome, brother. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks. It's hard not to get hyped up after that intro, so appreciate that.
Just try to pep you up, man. Just bring the heat, bring the energy, which I know you will. And for everyone listening, just give a little bit context, background. What was young Andy doing and kind of led you through your career path to where it is at today?
Yeah, well, now you're asking me to age myself, right? I actually started my career in IT, so setting up servers, working with domains, all that kind of stuff was kind of my jam. And back when there was an up and coming website called MySpace, and there was this thing called Facebook that was only for college kids, I wrote a presentation for the company I worked for the CEO, talking about how I thought we could use the networks that those things had to influence people buying stuff in stores in local cities by giving away coupons. To this day, I think that might actually have been the very first ever influencer marketing campaign. So I'm sorry, world, for creating that. And it was unbelievably successful. Like the amount of coupons they got not only downloaded, but actually used at stores was something GNC, who we were working with at the time, had never even heard of. And so right after that, my boss sits me down and says, "Congratulations, you're now our digital marketing leader and the IT guy." So he's doing, no more pay, just 2 jobs now. And that was the beginning of my love affair with not just marketing, but like data and using technology and data to get people to do things. That's what marketing is all about, right? It's like you are trying to connect with people who want to take an action and helping them make that action. And the better you are at that, the more you can get the right people who are looking for the right action that you can provide the result to. That's what this is all about. That's what we do, right?
I love that. You kind of almost just fell into it, into the world of marketing. Like when you were younger, were your whole plan just, I want to go into the, kind of the IT, the tech, I want to be the backroom guy. And now being the face of marketing, was that always kind of a plan or a thought of yours, or it was just because of that incident you're like, hey, I kind of like this? Because obviously you've stuck with it. You've led some very, very impressive organizations. And so, yeah, what was that about?
Yeah, I mean, no, young Andy was very, very curious, liked playing video games, and that often involved having to fix the computer.
What do you play now? What are you playing now?
Today, like I play a lot of Destiny. I've got some good friends at Bungie.
Are you a Fortnite guy?
I am not a Fortnite guy. I don't have the fast twitch anymore to be good at it, and so I rage quit every single time. I like the ones with a story.
I love that. So, in what I think is so interesting about you, and this, almost guarantee this is what's made you successful, and everyone's knows because I've talked about this before, is a lot of marketers are the right brain, like, me, like very much right brain, like the creative ideas. And you are as well. You've got like almost the best of both worlds because you have that technical data background and kind of engineer mind to be able to match it with the creative of marketing. That makes a very dangerous, positively dangerous combination of a person. So how, have you had to do a lot to like refine and hone in more on the learning of data skills in marketing, or is it more the other side in the creative and really trying to like enhance your skills in that arena?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started out my career, right, I was like in many ways a unicorn, right? Nobody had met a marketer that was really high tech. And so that's, I think, what really helped me out very much early in my career. But I had to go learn and still am learning every single day the creative side, right? Like for the most part, that's not an inherent skill for me. It's something that I've developed over time. And I think of it as like I'm kind of faking the funk on that side, except now I've done it for so long that at least I'm relatively good at faking that funk. But when I over time have developed others, it's shifted. Right now there's a lot more people in marketing that think of themselves as technologists first, and so that's why you get, for example, like brand marketing and growth marketing, and they are a cohesive whole within a marketing organization, because marketing teams and marketing leaders are starting to realize, like, I need this balance, right? I need the Moneyball marketers, the people that prove and deliver the ROI, but I pair them with creatives so that together as a team, we've got that thing that says we're doing all the right things, we're targeting in all the right ways, but we're landing a good message with great visuals, with a good story. Like those things do have to balance. It's not, you're not going to be as successful if you lean too heavy to one or the other. And as a leader, now my job is to make sure that my inherent balance and my inherent proclivities don't become perception for where my team is at, right? I've got to make sure that they're balanced and that they have these capabilities, because I don't do all of the things anymore.
So your role now, as, and I made a mistake, you're technically the CMO role, SVP growth marketing for Docker. And so in that position, are you more really focused on talent now and almost like an HR kind of role and making sure people are placed in the right position? Are you still very much in this particular role, like, um, I want to say like active, like you're in the sandbox still pretty heavily, or do you focus a lot more on like, okay, my skill set, I need to evolve this to like placing the right people, getting the right, butts in the seats to accelerate our growth?
Yeah, it's all of the above for me, right? I'm a huge believer in servant leadership, leading from the front, however you want to put it, right? It doesn't mean that I have or should be spending the time to do hands-on keyboard for a lot of stuff, but I do get in and listen to how my team is making the sausage and give direction and nudge, and more importantly, give strategy and vision that says this is where I want us to be, and help bring them along to getting there. But the other half of that, as the leader, is like you do have to hire folks or put folks in the right positions where they're enabled to create that, right? It's cannot be all me. It has to be my leadership team. It has to be their leadership teams. It has to be all of us that have this drive to create the culture of execution, the culture of data mindedness, the culture of Moneyball marketing that permeates every aspect of the marketing team. And that's a big part of what I build, right? It is hiring and HR, but it is also leadership and inspiration and those things to show and live these things that we're talking about today for them, and explain to them what that looks like and make it so that that becomes part of who they are and how they operate individually and as team members.
I think this will be really interesting, and I want to get deeper and break down, the Moneyball marketing side of things. But for Docker, right? And you're newer into this role, so this will be really interesting for people to hear from, someone as seasoned as you, which has been what, 3 months or a few months now at this
Yeah.
point into
Yeah.
Docker, like, stepping into it. And so first, talk about what is Docker, what's the product service you provide, and some of the personas, and then I'll have a follow-up question, kind of based around that.
Yeah, Docker is a software creation solution that really it lives in the space called containers or containerization. And what it does is I think of it more as a developer experience tool because it enables teams and organizations to have consistency in how they create tools, consistency in how they apply their code, how they share code, how they interact with each other. And it makes things just work so that the apps, the services, whatever it is you're building as a developer is actually more resilient, higher quality, easier to maintain, easier to manage, all of these things that then allow the engineers to focus more on being good engineers, driving the creativity, because engineers are creative too, right? They're coming up with new ways to solve old problems that no one's ever thought of before. And if they're spending too much of their time just like setting up their computer or that kind of stuff, it's a total waste of effort and total waste of their brain power. So tools like Docker, especially Docker, make it way more possible to just skip straight to letting them be the engineers and the high quality humans that we know they are.
And then who is, top 3, 4, kind of that buyer suite, so people listening can understand, like, obviously you're not selling Girl Scout cookies on the street. This is an enterprise, B2B play. Who are those kind of personas?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So Docker has like one tremendous benefit that I've almost never had in my career, which is there's 20 million engineers across the planet that already use Docker every single day. They're just using the free open source solution, right? And that's fine. But when it's time to up level your whole team and up level your organization and take containerization from a single individual to a whole group of people maximizing the benefit, that's when the VP of engineering, the CIO, the CTO, the head of engineering teams, the directors even, right? They're going out and they're saying, okay, it's time to buy Docker because then we can connect and go from this like single player engineer is better to multiplayer, the entire team is better. And that's the thing that makes it so much better, so awesome for everybody out there that buys it.
So here, especially I don't know when we're going to fully release the podcast, but right now we're recording December 2023, about to roll into 2024, new into a role. You got a lot to achieve for next year. What are the top things that you're focusing on in terms of execution for growth next year? And even if you want to get into level of detail, like, these are definitely the channels I'm gung-ho. Here's the reasons why. Like, feel free to share a little bit of that. I think people would learn a lot from those insights.
Yeah. So right now, my top priority is getting myself settled, right? 3 months in a role, 2 months in a role, getting my team starting to move in the direction of like that next level up, right? Every marketing leader that I talk to that's mentored me and those that I mentor as well go through these phases where they know their team is here and they have a vision for like, okay, what's the next phase of this look like? And so getting to that next phase is about execution, right? You set a strategy that matters and that's important. But then the strategy for most people tends to be 9 months out, 12 months out, 2 years out, right? Depending on how far out you want to be thinking. And what gets lost is
how far out are you thinking on that?
Right now, from where I'm at, I'm thinking out like the next. It's roughly 13 months, right? So my next fiscal year plus the remainder of this one, and
okay.
I'm painting a picture for what needs to be real for us as a team, right? I call it the yonder star. What needs to be real, and what's the yonder star for where we want to be 15 months from now? And then what happens is we start really getting actionable. Like, what are we doing next, right? This is repositioning our company and our products, doing like basic product framework, product positioning, right? Not that we don't have that already, but there's a layer of like, we're now adding more products. They are doing more things for more engineers. The scope of impact the company can have is increasing. And as we've developed things over time, they're not quite as aligned as they used to be or should be. So you revisit those things, right? Rebuild the foundation, rebuild the basics, the blocking and tackling. Then we do want to extraordinarily expand our investment in external advertising, paid marketing, that kind of stuff, right? The basic channels are and have been there. You've got Google search, you've got some display and video kind of stuff, and you've got LinkedIn. But I really want to get us into a whole lot more there, right? There are more and more, especially because of privacy laws, things like what we're used to hearing these days as marketers. The public networks, right? The Adobe ad networks and the Google ad networks, they're good for a certain kind of growth, but they're not going to deliver the high end leads or the high end signups or whatever it is you're trying to drive. that the newer niche communities are driving, right? Like think about a company that's really trying to connect with marketers, right? They could go to LinkedIn, they could go to display networks, they could do this, or they know that your network is exclusively all marketers, or at least mostly, right? And you'd have to be a very, very
Are
curious
you talking
person.
about associations, tapping into communities,
Exactly,
essentially?
right? More
Yeah.
and more marketers are going to start investing in exactly that. Associations,
Mm,
private communities, niche websites with private audiences, or larger websites that own their data first party, right? I can go to a Reddit and I can say, "Hey, anybody that follows these subreddits, start advertising to them," and that's a really good way to target, right? And it's these things, these channels and these motions that I think are going to utterly replace the very broad 3P data lookalike kind of display advertising that follows folks, right? You do, if you're
mm.
doing fast moving consumer goods, you still have a lot of great places to play because you've got the Facebooks and Instagrams and, the follow up ads and things like that that follow. But if you're in B2B, you're going to have to get a lot smarter so that you're not spending too much acquiring people that are going to amount to nothing for you, right?
And
And
you're
that's a
and
big part.
you're you're kind of like a lot of listeners probably in your position, they have a SaaS solution or product or service where there's like a freemium option or maybe like a low tier, and there's kind of two avenues, right, to put your focus. Not to say both can't be tackled at the same time, but they're different initiatives. One is that new client acquisition, approach that you're talking about, doing ads and growing that way. The other is obviously getting your existing users to expand and to eventually invest into the platform. And so where do you see um, being a good like area of focus, and maybe even recommendation for other marketers? Like, should I focus on my existing users and really dial in my marketing there to scale those up if I could only pick one or the other? Or should I really just, especially with where the economy's at, the market, go through those cold acquisition channels and grow that up to get new users onto the platform?
Yeah, and I would say, before I answer your question directly, right, it actually is a little more complicated than even that. Because if you have a B2B SaaS offering, you most likely don't have a pure only self-service product-led growth kind of motion, right? I don't really believe that pure only self-service product-led growth exists unless you're a consumer company like a Netflix that has just like a hard, this is the biggest plan you can get. There's nothing better to buy. So we sell it to you directly as the consumer, right?
Or Hulu, with somehow I ended up paying for $38 for Hulu this month. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but somehow I self-selected into a higher tier of Hulu. So I need
Exactly. And
to
that's
check my
that's
subscription.
PLG. That is pure PLG right there, right? But if you're in B2B SaaS, there's also, well, which one of those customers do I up level and start a conversation with sales, right?
Mm,
And the funny thing is that the way that I've been training my new sales team as well is that to think of it not as what can I sell you, but it's actually that first conversation is I should be saving you money. Because if you
mm,
bought Docker or you bought any SaaS solution on credit card, and now you're up to like the highest tier before you have to go enterprise on that credit card, you're paying too much. And the bottom tier of enterprise should actually be less because you're not paying the rack rate. No one pays the rack rate anymore when they talk to sales, right? There's always that first year 10-20% discount, whatever it is. And so you've got to, as the marketer, think about your product led growth funnel and whether you're driving expansion within that, as you said, or acquisition. And to be honest, like you've got to constantly be shifting between the two. And then you've got product qualified leads. So who are you graduating from that funnel into sales? And then you get to think about, is there a place in the world of those three things where I also want to go get brand new sales leads, like new account acquisition, right? And in an ideal state as a marketer, I want that one to not have to exist, right? To be purely organic. People that
mm.
come to us and fill out a contact form and say, but I really, really want to talk to sales. But ideally, I want my sales team to only be talking to customers that have been customers already in the self-service funnel and grew through product-led growth. And now it's time to have that sales conversation. And
And
then
you
they're
said you're
talking
training your sales team.
to think
That's
that way, right? Like that doesn't mean they're going
yeah,
to adopt that immediately, but the
yeah,
more I
yeah.
say it, the more I repeat this, the more they start understanding that that's panacea, right? Like that's the
Mm.
light at the end of the tunnel because they don't want to have to go out and do cold emailing and cold LinkedIn's and all this stuff. And frankly, given the changes coming from Yahoo and Google, like that's going to get a hell of a lot harder as far as email goes, right?
And,
So
and it already is. Like, people don't trust
yeah,
anybody anymore. They
How
trust
many
their
cold sales
communities.
emails have you answered in the last year, right? Like literally one for me.
I mean, if timing's right, the right offering, whatever, but that's only 3% of your entire market that's ever ready to jump onto something like that.
Yeah. Now, I'm not
Um,
saying that shouldn't exist, right? But in a perfect world, that's a lot less of the energy the sales team is spending and
mm,
more they're spending on folks who are already customers who just need to upgrade and level up to the right layer for themselves, right? For their own companies.
mm. So what is Moneyball marketing? You got to talk about that, and how does this kind of tie into just the bigger picture of everything we've really touched on so far?
Yeah, so Moneyball marketing is actually not a term I coined, but someone coined on my behalf, I'll say, which is, when I was at New Relic, my former leader there,
Just own it,
Ishan.
bro. Just we're gonna make some t-shirts. You and I are gonna start a little side hustle. We're gonna get some Moneyball marketing. So we're gonna get Brad Pitt to sign
Hey,
on to it,
if you get Brad Pitt, I'm
and
in.
Jonah Hill. Okay.
Oh man, yeah. So, anyways, the reason it came up is I had been doing whatever this is, right, and we were having a conversation around like how do I train others on how I'm thinking because the way to think about this, like which Moneyball marketing, I always imagine it as like a visual, right, which is you've got this giant dashboard of a bunch of levers, knobs, things, right? It looks a lot like the cockpit of an airplane, and every little one of these things has a signal on it. And if you tweak and tune and tweak and tune and tweak and tune over time, you're just incrementing your growth little by little by little by little. But you're focused on looking at the whole thing and trying to understand, does a tweak there amount to a thing here, amount to a there, right? And you see the connections between those things that you're doing. And that visual helps people understand like how complicated marketing really is because a move over here might look like more a little bit further down, and then you get down to cost of acquisition or lifetime value and realize you might have just tanked your business. So you've got to have a really good sense for the ebbs and flows of all of your surface area of impact. And then as you do things, as you do activities, you run plays, you run campaigns, whatever it is, you measure that, right? And so as I was describing this and explaining this, my former boss goes, okay, so you're talking like Moneyball, but for marketing. And I was like, yes, it's Moneyball marketing. That's exactly what it is. And it is exactly that, right? I got the benefit of starting earlier in my marketing career. I spent a lot of energy around experimentation, right? Like website experimentation, A/B testing, personalization, that kind of stuff. And when you try to start figuring out the impact of those things, you really start understanding how deep you have to go down the rabbit well of downstream, right? And then there comes a point where it cuts off and you say, okay, there's nothing this experiment on the website's homepage could have done to impact retention 6 months later, right? But you learn all these ebbs and flows, you start doing it, and everything you do in marketing starts being about where the opportunities are and what you should be doing there. And the cool part is, as a marketing team, when I see my team start transitioning to Moneyball marketing, something very interesting starts happening. They start being less involved purely in marketing things. And suddenly they're helping do outreach templates for the sales team, or they're talking to the product marketing folks
Mm.
about positioning on a particular web page or a particular product, or they're talking to customer service about how we do dunning calls or retention emails or those kinds of things, because they realize that marketing can have and should have influence in every stage of the life cycle, up and down the stream, and you just keep going up and down to wherever the most impact can happen. And that's what this whole concept is, right? And so it takes
Marketing
time.
alignment, but with cooler terminology.
Yes, as most good things are these days, right?
It's
Everything's
like
already been thought of.
what's that? It's like what's that Rick and Morty? It's like whatever with extra steps. Which
Yes,
is
that's exactly what it is.
but so for someone who's not as much of a data mind, myself for example, right? Very much a right brainer. Um how do I go in and apply this if I am the CM, me being CMO for my company? What are some of the first steps, things to look at to, the secrets behind executing Moneyball marketing?
Yeah.
Some call it sales and marketing alignment, but in your case, I think it's much, much deeper than that. So does deserve a term of its own. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that gets back to whenever I'm mentoring a marketer, like the very first thing I try to impress upon them is how important it is for you as a marketer to understand the metrics of your whole company, not just how many leads did we get, how many of this did we get, the stuff that's specific to marketing, and not just sales, but how's your churn doing? How's your net dollar retention doing? How's your total revenue doing versus target? Those kinds of things, right? The more you expand your understanding of the health of the whole business and all the other teams, right? Look at Durametrics and engineering, look at delivery rates, look at all kinds of stuff like that. The better you start feeling connected to the things that are going on around you. And then you start asking questions, right? And these questions should be, well, I know this thing's happening, right? What happens next phase down the funnel? And if you don't have the answer, go to your data team, go to your RevOps team, go to whoever you need to go to and start building out the reporting, right? And ideally, if you can influence this, get as much of that reporting to exist in as few places as possible, right? Like,
what is the true causation to correlation?
Exactly, right? And then you start asking more and more questions, because the thing is, like, it's all hypothesis driven Moneyball marketing, right? So you think that channel is having a bigger impact on this particular metric than geography,
which is so common. You're pouring a bunch of money into LinkedIn ads, for example, and you're like, well, we're getting deals from it. But what you're not realizing is that it's actually coming from your Google ad spend, and then people are re-seeing you somehow through LinkedIn, and you're not looking at the right data. So your correlation to causation isn't, actually connecting the dots in that case. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
And the first thing you do then is experiment, right? Like, I've literally done experiments where we said, okay, we're not going to market in Singapore for a month. Let's see what happens, right? Yes, that could potentially hurt the business. It's not going to be, a giant pain. It's not going to tank your entire business, or at least don't do it if it would. And then you measure, well, what happened downstream in that thing that I had a hypothesis about. And if it turns out to be true, you also always have to know, when you have a hypothesis, if true, what would I do? If not true, what would I do? Because if you don't have that, if you're not thinking about what happens as a result, that test is not worth doing, right? And so you measure these things, you look at them, and you make a change, and then you look at the reporting over time. How's everything else holding up after my change, right? How is our revenue growth 45 days after I paused spend in Singapore, right? And there are real world examples where I've done this, right? In Google search especially, right? There are countries where it's incredibly inexpensive still to get a sign up or a lead, right? So if you're a company that focuses on engineers, you get, 1 million leads for $10 a piece from India, or 1,000 leads for $180 a piece from the US, right? And you wonder, like, is India better? And the only way to measure that is to start looking at what's happening downstream. And one of the most interesting learnings I had when I ran exactly that experiment is that not only was India actually more effective and efficient in and of itself, but then we started looking at, well, where are the credit cards coming for that growth? And the huge amount of US credit cards, right? Partially because repayment in India or subscriptions in India are incredibly difficult, but also because those accounts that were being created there were subsidiaries of engineering firms or larger firms in the US, right? So they were entry points into that, right? Never would have done that if I hadn't committed the initial hypothesis that what we would do, ran the test, and taken the 9 months it took to really figure this out, right? So you also have to have a lot of tenacity and patience to do this right.
And just, it's like, take the 2 steps backwards to get 4 steps, 5 steps, 6 steps forward. It's so hard to do that. And understandably, you've got oftentimes pressure from leadership and board of directors and you name it. But it's the most powerful thing you can do at times, right? Like, I used to always just be gung ho. Once I myself personally, as a marketer, just learning from great guys like you, did that and really, really went to the root of understanding, Moneyball marketing. Things have exploded, right? And whatever I apply to explodes just by those basic principles. So I totally agree. You got to know the data, and everyone talks about data. But data is bullshit if you do not know the root cause of where that data is coming from and how it's getting there. And I think us as marketers maybe think we know, but we don't know what we don't know, I would say.
Yeah. And you can't, I meet a lot of marketers who say, well, I'm not a data person though. I live in this part of marketing. Kill that part of your brain. Everybody is capable of being a quote unquote data person. It is not rocket science. I'm not some, I couldn't program my way out of a paper bag, right? I'm not a genius. I just have learned to appreciate and care about it. And once you appreciate and care about something, suddenly you'll get really good at it. I assure you.
Because I think a lot of influencers are out there like double down on your strengths, right? Forget your weaknesses, go all in on your strengths. But the most successful people who I've met double down on their weaknesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make their weaknesses into their greatest strengths.
Yeah. And even like, as you take this further, right? Like when you start experimenting, you start getting good at it, you got the data and you start having wins. Then the other thing you have to develop is this consciousness of not accepting your own wins. So I go back a lot to my, with my team, and we look at what are the things that we did 3, 4, 5 months ago? How are they doing today? Because oftentimes what you see happening is a team has a bunch of wins. And if you added up all the wins, your revenue would have grown by 50%, but your revenue grew by 20%. So what happened, right? And it's easy. You're cannibalizing from yourself. There's things that impacted other things. There's diminishing returns, all of the above. But it's worth going back and looking and saying, is there something we assumed was a success that at the time looked like it, that new data, current data tells us actually wasn't? And we can revisit that and back out of that, right? It's perfectly okay to have made the wrong call when you're always willing to review it and correct.
What's one thing you've held as a long-standing belief about B2B marketing that in recent months you've actually maybe changed your mind on about B2B marketing?
I mean, I don't know if it's recent, but it just continues to get pounded into my brain that B2B marketing is not B2B marketing, right? It's business to person marketing. And yes, there's a business buying, but there are people, right? And the whole concept of the buyer group, right? Like we used to think about, well, is it the practitioner and the buyer? Now it's like, is it practitioner, buyer, security, procurement, leadership, executive sponsor? Like who are all the people that are going to be participant in this deal that we're making, right? So that one always sticks with me. And then the other one that really is more and more, it's newer and I'm solidifying more thinking around, right? Is that the buyer is the director, the VP, the leader, right? That the fallacy there is that the individual, the person that did the trial, the person that's hands on keyboard, isn't really influencing the purchase of a thing, right? And when you think about the tools that are really killing it right now, even in enterprise, right? Like the Figmas of the world, right? You find that the reason the VP gets involved, the reason the procurement team gets involved and the leadership team gets involved is because you have a groundswell of adoption at the user level, right? So they together are the buyer, right? And so when you think about selling enterprise solutions, try as hard as you can to find a way to create adoption of those enterprise solutions at the user level, at the individual level, so that you have that platform to stand on, and they create the lead, they create the pushover into consideration and acquisition.
And that was one thing I did forget to ask you is, are there any platforms, softwares, applications, just in the marketing suite that you're like fanatical about right now?
Yeah, there's a bunch, right? The first one is 6 Sense, right? Like not they're just invaluable in so many ways. And the better you get at it, the more value you get out of it. Like a lot of platforms, they kind of, you limit yourself into how much ROI you draw from it. And like 6 Sense is this like never ending tool of ROI. The second, I'd be silly not to bring up Gen AI. And I do think that there's a practice that's starting up in marketing around being really good at prompting Gen AI to help create starters for content, right? I know there's others doing experiments around straight publishing from Gen AI to websites, but I'm not a giant believer in that just yet. But I do think you can teach your team and train your team to get the beginning of an article done via Gen AI, and then all they have to do is the extra work on top of it. And if you do it right and you prompt right, it's not that much extra work, right? So there's that. As far as other tools, like I am also, having come from Smartsheet, a big proponent of tools that help you manage the operating system of your team.
We love some Smartsheet.
Exactly. Smartsheet.
When in doubt, throw some Smartsheet out.
Yeah. I was recently talking to a marketer from Smartsheet, and they have this great perspective internally. I don't know how that's how they think of it externally, but they're kind of like duct tape, right? Like just about anything you want to solve, you can solve with Smartsheet. And then if it gets too big, fine, you go buy a point solution and spend a ton of money, right? But if you need to survey customers, if you need to track inventory, like all kinds of stuff, you can just knock it out. Right. So I do love that. And I do love like managing execution. And then, I think I'm like many people, I can't live without Slack. Like I would give up Zoom, I would give up email, I would give up everything before I gave up Slack. You can pry it from my cold dead hands.
Well, man, this has been one of my favorites. You're good at this. When are you going to launch your podcast, bro? We're gonna start the Moneyball marketing podcast, and so just let me know when you're ready. You got a co-host ready in the wings for you. I'll be the entertaining one. You'll be the smart one, and together we can do a little bit of both. But this has been fantastic. Any just for everyone listening, best way they want insights from you, mentorship, whatever, maybe want to see about any positions you have open. What is the best way to follow you, contact you, gonna get in connection with you?
Yeah, I do love mentoring people, right? So, hopefully this doesn't create a whole bunch of requests I can't fill, but I'm always looking for folks I can help out. And LinkedIn is my social network of choice for everything. So just look for Andy Ramirez on LinkedIn. I should be probably the top one that comes up.
We'll put that link in there, guys, and make sure you check out docker.com. Very impressive organization. And can't thank you enough for being here, brother. This has been fantastic. And for the rest of you listening, grateful for you guys as well. Much love to you, my friends. Make it great. And we will